Well, good morning, everybody. You know, a lot of us here across the country experienced one of our coldest Halloweens, at least in recent memory. And for many, we were approaching some record data here. So this animation is one of my favorites. It's from a great website called coolweather.com. That's COOLWX.com. When you get there, you can choose a lot of different ways to look at some of the kind of historical data here. And I've just chosen the United States past 24 hours, and we're looking at these dots, which represent the, either approaching or setting record low temperatures. That would be these colors. If we were on the hot side of it, you'd see these colors. And what I'm playing for you is just the last 24 hours. So this goes from yesterday morning to early this morning, and each one of these dots just represents a weather station that approached, or even some of them set new record low temperatures. So it was a cold Halloween last night, and early this morning as I'm recording about 6 o'clock, our temperatures were remained quite chilly. Now this pattern is on its way out. This is the extent of what we're going to be seeing in terms of the really cold weather, and it's going to push farther to the east and then get out to the east coast, and a lot more mild air is going to be flooding in across the country very soon. But we're kind of in a bit of a pattern reset right now, and most of that reset is happening along the west coast. We need to get in there and talk about it, just kind of see the latest updates, and then kind of plow into a little bit of information about a new long range and some interesting stuff in South America, so hang on for that. Right now, though, this is our all hazards weather map at 6 a.m. We've got some dense fog issues in the Pacific Northwest. We've got a broad area throughout here that's got the freeze warnings out, and we still have the red flag warnings that are in parts of the south down here. And this, again, is just due to some strong winds and very, very dry conditions. You know, as we've been reporting on and discussing, this has been one of the driest spots in the country, Louisiana, Mississippi, parts of Alabama, when going back over the last, 3 months or so and beyond. They are significant portions of those states that are in the highest category of drought right now. So any wind with any fuel, be it tender just in the drying out of the leaves and just our brush and stuff like that and grasses, we just have the risk of fire. So please be very careful down here today. The winds look something like this. So high pressure's moved in. That's why it's quite calm in through here. But just take a look at how far to the south those strong northerly winds have made it. And I'm always fascinated by the winds that move through the Tejano Pass down through here. And I'm just going to mention this again. When we get into our winter time frame, I mean like fully into December, January, February, and even March, when we start to see this, there's an interesting correlation between really cold air getting into the Gulf of Mexico and then the following 5 to 7 days watching for a lot of winter cyclone development in the south and in the mid-south. Now, we don't have anything set up right now, given the fall pattern we're in, but I want to watch that very carefully. Taking a quick look at the last 10 hours or so here of radar data, it was pretty quiet across most of the country. We watched the Clipper that rolled through parts of Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and parts of Michigan. Watch it as it starts over again. There it is, right over the tip of Lake Michigan here. Deliver a lot of local snow showers, and some of them got pretty heavy. It was kind of fun just to watch folks reporting on it. Some of the cameras that are all over the country here just picking up on the snow showers as they came barreling through with this little Clipper that rolled in here. And I live down in just outside of Champaign, Illinois, and we had some snow while we were out trick-or-treating. But it was brutally cold, so I really appreciate the house that served us pizza. That was fantastic. And the hot apple cider, brilliant move on a really cold night for trick-or-treating here. Okay, last 24 hours of Precip, though. The country was relatively quiet. Okay, so this is where we are, and we have questions about how much longer we're going to stay in this quieter time period, because I still feel as though we've got this kind of week-on, week-off pattern that's still persisting. The bigger change is happening here across the Pacific Ocean, and we've got this long, extended piece of the Pacific Jet we've been discussing here over the last couple of weeks that's now really beginning to show up. So broad area of high pressure to the south, deeper low pressure to the north, and in between, that gradient just sets us up with some really, really strong winds. And this is going to continue to press east and eventually get into the west coast of the United States. Now, as this zonal flow, that's what, when we say zonal, we just mean west to east, as that moves across the country, eventually here in the U.S., we are going to get the better chances of developing low pressure systems on the northern side of it, not the southern, but the northern side of it. And we can see that by looking here at our next 7 days of total accumulated precipitation from the WPC. Now what you've got is where this targets is the west coast. I mean, the Willamette Valley, up the I-5 corridor here, we're going to have some places that pick up 4, 5, 6 inches of rain. It's going to be heaviest, as we know, right in the foothills of the mountains and getting up toward the peaks, but also some of these coastal areas that are just used to getting tremendous amounts of rainfall, they're going to get it. Some of this will get into the rain shadow areas like the Columbia Basin, Central Oregon, and the southern extent of it looks as though it could get to Sacramento and south, maybe even getting closer to the San Francisco Bay Area, but heavier the farther you go into Northern California. Now, this is atypical for an El Nino November, but I just want to remind everybody there's been a constant over-attribution to every weather pattern to El Nino. And I've been guilty of it in past forecasts. We just have to be careful to remember that at any given time, El Nino's contribution to the pattern is not, it's not 100%. It's a background thing. Other sub-seasonal and even very near-term factors can override it at any moment. Okay, with that out of the way, I just want to show you that we're going to watch the northwest. We're going to watch this as an active corridor into there. And it could start to tap into better moisture at times through parts of the Midwest. But just as a reminder, when you look at these particular maps I make from the WPC, you're looking for two contour lines. There's a black one here that really shows a big jump in the colors. That's where I go from a 1/2 inch and above. And then there's a second one that goes right in through here, which is where I get to 1.5 inches and above. So I try to just identify those areas. So just notice, even though there's some moisture coming through this area, it's not much. We're still drier in the southeast, we're drier in the southern plains, and very dry in the southwest. And we're waiting patiently on the development of a good subtropical jet this year, which would be symptomatic of El Nino to come into this area. Okay, spent a lot of time on this graphic. Let's get out there and see what we're talking about. So again, that right there is this right here. So just a quick reorientation of your view here as we're looking down at the North Pole. As we play this forward through Thursday, into Friday, and eventually into the weekend, that's when we see the extent of that more southern kind of trajectory. It's farther to the south, but here it is, comes straight in out of the west, hitting the west coast. And that's what's going to be delivering the moisture. We're going to look at each round of it in just a few seconds. Now, as that comes across the country, like on the 5th into the 6th, 7th, and 8th, that's a that's a fast-moving piece of the jet stream. And what we end up getting out of this is systems that kind of build along the northern side where there's better upper level, what we call divergence. That's where the air is diverging aloft, creating low pressure at the surface. The problem with zonal flow versus more like high amplitude troughs and ridges is that you don't have the right ability to drop the pressure dramatically, and therefore you don't curl up these deep lows. They move very fast across the country, and they don't have a chance to really pull the moisture farther and farther to the west before moving it east. Does that make sense? It's too much. It's just plowing through like this. So that gets you all the way out to about a week from now. As we go beyond this into like the 9th and the 10th and the 11th, what I'm still watching, and this is really interesting, is we're starting to see this. See this piece right down here of the jet stream? That's our subtropical jet. Here's the polar jet. And what we continue to see in the models is that out there past the 10th and the 11th and the 12th, the polar jet retracts, the subtropical jet shows up, and we start to get this action here. And now this is going to be fun. If we can get this to happen during winter, and especially, I mentioned this last week or earlier this week, I don't remember, but tossing a big high pressure cell over Quebec, man, the East Coast is going to have, if you're a snow lover up the East Coast, this is exactly what you want to see, all right? But you got to get the high pressure to build in here, just as a case in point. But good subtropical jet, what's interesting about this pattern is you start to see some waves in it, right? So it's starting to develop those troughs. This is going to go back into week on in the midsection of the country while the west gets its break. So that's your overall diagnosis. This is what's controlling the pattern. Let's go in and see the results of it. I need to show you the maps from WeatherBell this morning. I apologize. On my website, this is now the 4th time this has happened in the last 30 days, but Amazon sent me over a corrupted file, and I got to get it fixed, and I just didn't have enough time this morning. I didn't catch it till about 5 a.m., and I was a little bit behind already this morning with this forecast. So I just played you through Thursday, and what we've got is our first big push of moisture coming through on Thursday, really Wednesday night into Thursday in the northwest. So there's going to be some snow north, but there's a lot of mild air with this. Now, when I say mild, I don't mean hot. I just mean not super cold. That's the way to interpret that. So you're going to get to pretty high elevation on your snow here. It's going to be quite windy in the northwest as well. This is now getting into early morning on Friday here, and then we're going to watch as we go through the day on Saturday. There is a deep low over the Hudson, and there's going to be this stalled out frontal boundary right in through there. And just don't be surprised if this weekend if you get some showers along it. That's kind of the main takeaway there. But the action goes back to the west, and we just continue to see our next push coming in on Friday night into Saturday. It stays there till Sunday. There it is. And then we'll watch early next week as the nose of the jet. So remember, the nose of the jet's getting all the way in here. And there's the low that's riding the northern side of it in the left exit of that real zonal jet, okay? So this is Sunday night into Monday morning. Now look, where's the coldest air? Stays pretty far to the north. So your snow line stays pretty far to the north as well. And remember, as I said, these lows don't get too deep because they just don't have the ability to just pull on a lot of moisture, and they move like this. It's only been a day, and this low has already moved this far, and it's going to move out in another day like this. Ready? So this is Monday, early Monday morning. By Tuesday morning, it's gone. See that? I mean, just zips through here, delivering snow on the northern side of it, but light rain on the southern side. We're all the way out to Tuesday, November the 7th, and there you go. There's your next push of moisture coming in the west. We're going to see that one come through, and guess what? It tries to drop another low. But again, you're not seeing a lot of snow out of these. This is Friday, November the 10th. There's a lot of mild air that comes in with it, but these systems are moving fast. They just zip on through the country. Now, I could show you the GFS. You're going to get a very similar look from the GFS, but why don't we just understand that the West Coast is going to get hit multiple times. Little systems clip along the north and they clip through the Midwest, but they're not big systems that draw in tremendous amounts of moisture. They're fast. They're really fast. Why? Because the winds and the jet stream level are 150 to 200 miles an hour, and they're going this way. They're not doing this. Okay, the fun happens when it does this. When it moves like that, boy, the jet stream just screams across and the systems follow it pretty quickly. So let's go ahead and add up some rainfall. Okay, so this is total precipitation, liquid equivalent where there's snow. No surprises here as we work through the next 3 days. There's your next 3 days. And as we go on forward into the weekend, we see the system, remember, early this weekend and early next week, roll across the northern tier of the U.S. This is just from the stalled out boundary, the weaker one around that deep low that I mentioned in the Hudson Bay, but all the moisture is targeting in the western United States. Honestly, I've been watching this thing I've been talking about down in the Caribbean. I don't think it's going to be a major player as we go forward. It's not, the jet stream's not set up to let something like this come north, but here we are next Tuesday. I'm just going to play this all the way out 10 days so you can kind of get an idea on it. Because there's that second system that develops late and moves across as well. But you look at this map and you see a lot of these shades down here with very little precipitation, and you see a lot of white. And this is an area that's continuing to be extremely dry and needs to fill in with rainfall in a big way quickly as we go into winter. To get that to happen, I need El Nino to take an outsized chunk of its influence into this, out of this pattern and just start chewing on it and using it. But I do want to compare models just so you see it, because this is the European, this is the 10-day from the GFS, the 0Z run. And overall, got the same kind of setup. Plowing into the west, systems rolling up first along the northern tier of the U.S. late this week into the weekend, and a system early next week that comes out here and moves through parts of the Ohio Valley toward the mid-Atlantic. But the same regions are kind of covered in, you know, white, that are covered in white by the GFS. We're looking here at where we're not getting that precip. I think it's always wise to just look at the ensembles and compare the probability maps. So this is the snow side of it first. So because of all that mild air coming in, if you want snow, it's got to be on the northern side. And this is just a 10-day outlook at who could get an inch. We have to start stepping this up to see where the more serious snowfall could be. So notice it's Canadian Prairie, getting in Ontario, Quebec, clipping parts of North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, into the whole northern tier of the U.S. is where we get our best chances. Outside of course, the mountains. Now you might look at this and go, wow, I would have expected more snow. There's too much mild air here. So your snow levels are pretty high. They're a little bit lower once you get into the Rockies, all right? But they've got to be pretty high here, and total snowfall amounts are really dwindling quickly. I mean, that's the probability of getting a foot out of the latest European model run. Let's flip this over to precipitation. Total precipitation, and I'd now like to look not at anomalies. Let's go up here to probabilities, sorry. Let's see who's going to be on the wettest side of this. That's a 10-day outlook of at least an inch. Now let's look at the west and see how much they could get. That's the chance of getting 2 inches, and I got to step this up again. There's your wettest corridor. Over 4 inches possible in this area. The dry side of this is going to be pretty clear cut. Everywhere that we mentioned missing this flow, like the southwest, the southeast, and parts of the Canadian Prairie, because remember, it's just going right here through the mid part of the country. You get too far away from it, you're just looking at drier conditions overall. All right. Now, once we get out there into week 2, this is what we expected to see given the MJO going back to phase 1 and favoring it. This trough at some point has got to come into the United States. And as it does, it could kick off more interesting weather in the midsection of the country after plowing through the west, dropping the temperatures way down, out there past about the 10th or the 11th. Now, the models lose it after this. They don't keep the signal very strong. There's too much model spread. So there's a bit of uncertainty even after day 10 as to how these systems come out. So we're going to have something to watch here. And I want to show you that uncertainty a little bit in a more clear way, I guess, by comparing the European, this is the European model, to the CPC forecast, to the GFS forecast. And if you notice, about the only place they agree on is the Northwest, keeping their wet signal. The European model's been toying with a system here in the midsection of the country that I think can't be ignored when we look out here at the week 2, the week 2 forecasts. And I'll look to be providing an update on that very soon. Okay, switch over to the temperature side before we stretch this out a bit. This is what we're looking at today. The coldest air is probably extending the farthest to the south, and it'll continue to move east. But as I mentioned, we're going to get some mild air into this, and it's coming in pretty soon. So there's today's highs. As we go from today to tomorrow, watch. See the mild air already starting to come back in. Really quite warm across the west. I mean, just think about this. We saw single digits in Nebraska for lows recently. In fact, I think there's a couple places that dropped below 0. And we're going to be by Friday back up into the 60s, 70s in Kansas, and probably grabbing some 80s farther to the south. This is Saturday, getting into Sunday and Monday and Tuesday. And that's a pretty a nice shift back towards some more mild temperatures overall. What does it look like beyond that? Well, let's just go ahead and have a look at the European ensemble. This is the next 5 days. This is moving out there to day 5 through 10, which is here. And this is day 10 through 15. But the only significant change that I saw was that day 10 through 15 in previous runs was a bit colder east. The pattern kind of opened up to more normal, I guess you'd say, temperatures, but I think this was largely due to some pretty high model spread in the ensembles. And I think I understand why that's the case. I think what's going on here is we are about to enter an interesting transition time period. And I'm going to cover this in detail in my last video this week when I typically do my long range. But I want to explain to you why the models are losing their week 2 signal, okay, and beyond. I think it starts with the fact that as we watch this animation, I love this. This is a 90-day animation of ocean temperatures. This was the biggest feature right here. The development of the very positive phase of the Indian Ocean Dipole. Now watch, this starts back over in August. And once we get to the end of August, beginning of September, keep an eye right here. The trade wind started cranking mid-December, cold water upwelled, and it's gotten pushed across the open Indian Ocean. It peaked about 10 to 15 days ago, and since then has been slowing down a bit. During that same time, El Niño, right here, has been increasing ocean temperatures in the central equatorial Pacific. Now it's kind of interesting. You see the ocean warming, and it looks like it's going in this direction. But what's actually happening here is that the trade winds, which normally blow really hard in this direction, are not blowing as hard. In fact, they're starting to turn around again in this area. And what that's going to allow this to do is over the next probably 45 to 60 days, we're going to watch the ocean temperatures in here go up probably a ½ degree or more. Now that may not seem like much, but that's a huge change in those ocean temperatures. And what that's going to do is that's going to take our current El Niño, which is building right here, from moderate strength up towards strong, maybe about 1½ to almost 2 degrees C above average when it gets to its peak. Now that will be below what we saw in 15, 16, and 97, 98. Okay, but it's going to be a relatively strong El Niño signal when you look at these indice values. Now, I've made a case that says, hey, El Niño has yet to take reins of this pattern. And I don't know if I'm trying to convince myself of this, but I think I'm starting to see El Niño doing El Niño things. I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but this right here, see that's way out there mid-November? That is an El Niño thing. The lack of a strong Pacific jet getting all the way to the west coast, that's an El Niño thing. But this is out there mid-month. So if we come back and have a look at this, I think we're going to start to see El Niño start to gain some influence, and I want to make a case for it, okay? So let's finish this up by looking at some long range and then South America. The first map I want to show you is if you were to just to correlate historically November precipitation patterns with ocean temperatures in the middle of the equatorial Pacific. So this is really an El Niño comparison. We tend to be drier here. Now we're not starting that way right now. We're not starting off drier. But if the Pacific jet retracts by the time we get to the middle of the month, that area will go drier. If that subtropical jet comes in, that does mean, as you see in the warmer colors, that this whole area to the south of this line will go through a time period. It's not going to last from now till March, but a time period of wetter conditions. And these folks are desperate for it. These folks are desperate for it, and we need to start to fill in this area that's been diving into drought as of late. The Midwest doesn't have a strong signal. The Great Lakes don't have a strong signal, but that's what the precipitation would do. On the temperature side of it, let's flip this over and create the new plot. This is the probability for temperatures. We tend to go more mild across the northern tier of the U.S., colder south. Those are the two strongest signals. Most everywhere else, the correlations are too weak to really say something about. So knowing that, I was a bit surprised at the CPC's update for the month of November. Now, they updated this. They always update this at the very end of the month, so just a quick reminder. They've got much more mild weather in the west and cooler east. Now, I don't doubt that we're going to see this in flashes here over the next, starting right now, and then over the next several days. We've got that now. But notice this. They're wetter in the northwest. We definitely start the month really wet right here, but I don't know if it lasts wet there through the whole of the month. And they've got this area over drier, okay? But I want to make a case to say that I think as we get into this month of November, if that subtropical jet gets going, we tend to kick off more storms to the south, and they tend to come in like this. And that could reverse that as well. I don't know why, but I continue to side with what the European model shows. And this is going out there to mid-December. And so look, this drier signal here, okay, if that Pacific jet stops plowing forward after it's going to, like it is right now, it's really just hammering the northwest now. But let's imagine it backs off like the models say, and the subtropical piece picks up. See that? The European model is suggesting El Niño starts to grab hold of this pattern, and unlike what the CPC said, this is precipitation, by the way, the temperature side of this looks a little different as well. They've got cooler air in the west, not warmer, and if there's warmth, it's just a little bit warmer than normal across the Canadian prairie, maybe parts of the plains. So we've got a lot to be diagnosing here, and I think this is going to be critical to understand if we're actually going to get El Niño taking over. So can I tell you what you need to watch with me? First thing is this, the Southern Oscillation Index. Now, why do we watch that? That's all the way over between Tahiti and Darwin. It's a measure of pressure difference. We watched all of October this value go up. That is why in October I stopped telling you about El Niño being any sort of an influence, because it was losing influence. This has to go down for El Niño to be strengthening and being a major player. What took over? The MJO, the Indian Ocean Dipole. That's why we spent so much time talking about it. The Indian Ocean Dipole is peaked. The MJO is peaking with what it's been doing because of the IOD now. And what I want to know is, watch this with me over the next few weeks. If this starts doing this, we will get a more El Niño-like pattern as we go through November into December. I'm starting to get some evidence of that by looking at these plots. We're watching right now the strongest rising motion over Africa, which is a 100% clear signal that the Indian Ocean Dipole is holding the MJO hostage. We'll talk about this again later, but look at this. Over the next 15 days, this is a pretty substantial westerly wind burst. That's very El Niño-like in behavior. Boom, just jumps out like that. And what that could be doing here is sending the Southern Oscillation Index negative. It's starting to help develop the subtropical jet and giving us a time period at late November into early December of typical El Niño type behavior in the atmosphere. Now, what's going to be interesting to watch is as that all occurs, this. Let's go back to that ensemble average right here. Now, we've been talking about some stresses that have hit Brazil lately. There's flooding south, been drier north, and we are expecting in the models to possibly see better rising motion that could hit the very dry parts of the Amazon. It could hit the drier parts of Brazil and be a big push toward taking the lid off and letting it rain. And I want to finish with that. So this is the probability over the next 10 days of getting 2 inches of rainfall. All right. So when you look at this, our flooding problems continue, but we're starting to see better chances of that rainfall getting into central and northern Brazil. It's a 50 to 80% chance. There is a hole, and it's right in the middle. And what I just circled right in through there, that includes southern Mato Grosso and Mato Grosso do Sul over to parts of Sao Paulo. I mean, this is a main ag district that it has that's going to be a problem, low probability of getting that much rainfall. But it's an improvement. And I see the models starting to just add up the rainfall through Friday into Saturday, getting out here into early next week. And we start to see them trying to fill this in. If that's a bust, we continue to go into major, major problems in Brazil. If that verifies, that is a signal for recovery after the recent heat and drought stress that we've seen. This is still a signal that cannot be ignored. It's in every model run, incredibly heavy rain down into southern Brazil. And I can't ignore the fact that models are trying to put better thunderstorm activity into Argentina, which has been exceptionally dry at times, and some places have missed out on some of the early rainfall. They're carrying over 2 years' worth of drought there. But the biggest surprise to me was this. We finally, since this is the start of the new month, got an update on our NDVI values. And I showed you last week that in Mato Grosso, that those values were well below the 20-year average, and they're well below last year. See the end of this red line? The most recent data has taken the NDVI and popped it back up here, near the average and above last year. Now that could just be because of emergence. I mean, that's what we could be seeing here. But if I start to add in Mato Grosso do Sul and toss in Goiás, we see that, well, we take Goiás off there. At least Mato Grosso do Sul helped it bump up. But Goiás, another big producing state, it's not as though it stayed in the basement. Remember, I told you I was worried that it would just stay down here. But it instead came back up, excuse me, toward average. Now, this is just one metric. This is NDVI. There's a lot of other things that go into understanding the condition of the crop. But I wanted you to see what was happening in Brazil, and we're going to finish, if I can get down there and click on that. Let's move that up so you can see it better. There we go. I did want to show you, too, that in Cordoba, they came out of the basement as well and popped up a bit, although they're still well below the 20-year average. And we include Santa Fe and Buenos Aires. We're still down here pretty low compared to where we should be. So there just still indicates some problems in Argentina that need cured by rainfall as well. This is not an ideal start. In other words, it's not the best start for South America for the start of the season for everybody. But I've heard some reports that this is like the worst start ever. I don't know where that's coming from. I talked to my friends and colleagues down there. I know growers in Argentina. It's just a privilege I have to have known some people down there. And they're not screaming at me, telling me that it's a disaster. There are issues, but I just want to be clear that it's early. We just need to watch it carefully to see if it continues to be a problem. And a few days from now, we'll get new long-range data to support all of this. So thanks for hanging on this morning. I'll talk to you again tomorrow morning. Thanks.